Okay, now that we have gone through all the 5 basic stances of Wushu, we're going to go through some stance combinations or stance drills where we combine at least 2 stances together in relevant movement patterns that you are going to see in your taolu or your forms. Okay? So the first one we're going to do is the horse stance, bow stance. Okay? So going down a line, we're going to go from our horse stance to our bow stance. So if this is my front and I'm going to go this way, I'm going to turn front into my bow stance. And I'm going to open my foot and then step 180 across and do horse stance to the side and turn towards the front again. So the way that we move and pivot our feet, general rule of thumb is if we're choosing a front side and a back side, if this is my front and this is my back, the front foot pivots on the heel. Simultaneously, the back foot pivots on the ball of the foot. Okay? Now, I'll do it on the other side. If this is my front, this is my back. Front foot pivots on the heel. Back foot pivots on the ball of the foot. And then both feet go flat. Okay? So, this is sort of a fancy little footwork you can do. You can try it on the dance floor if you want. I can't really dance, but whatever. From here, when we step out into our horse stance, we want to be able to pivot on the heel so that we're stable on our front foot, and we want to pivot on the ball of the foot with our back foot to generate power in the appropriate way that we want for our style of bow stance. Okay? So, when we pivot, again, we want to ensure that we do not have the toes facing outward, resulting in our hips and our knees misaligning and having knee valgalization. Again, when the knee misaligns with the toes, especially when it caves or bows in, this is conducive to an ACL tear. And if we go into this type of position abruptly or violently, you're going to injure your knee, you're going to tear your knee, and we do not want that. So, to avoid that mistake, what we can do is we can pivot just a small inch, just a small perceptible inch. We don't need to swing our heel all the way out. We just have to go 1 increment at a time. Just a small movement, small instantaneous movement. And then we pivot our back foot so that our back hip is square facing forward. And again, if the toes are facing generally forward or inwards, that's actually preferable to facing outwards, for reasons we just stated. Okay? So, when you step forward, you want to ensure that you are not stepping on one line. This is a very common error. If I were to step on one line, and I try to square up my hips going forward, I am actually going to end up having my hips too oblique rather than square. It's going to be very, very difficult for me to turn forward and square up because I simply don't have enough space to square up. Okay? So, whenever we're doing these line basics, you want to imagine that your feet are on 2 different train tracks, and they do not cross, and they do not meet on the same line. So, for example, if we're training the line basics and we're going down a line, we want to step a little bit out, as if the line were our center line and we are not crossing it. So when we pivot, we square up and we step forward, and the width of our feet is generally hip to shoulder width is acceptable. This is very natural when we're sort of lunging forward. And again, the front heel is going to pivot so that we can open up and move forward. We're facing sideways for our horse stance, and then we're going to pivot to the front to be square. Okay? So, as you can see, this is a very 1-2 motion, so you want this to be a very snappy, popping motion, especially with the back foot. You want to see this back foot strike the heel on the ground. In Chinese, this is called dong. We are literally doing a heel strike into the ground, which is why we pivot on the ball of the foot. This forms the basis of snapping or popping for strikes, okay? So, for example, how can I borrow you? So if I were to do a strike, what this does is it teaches me to pivot on the ball of my foot. So if you could just hold your hand up it a little bit, yes. If I were to just push you, I can do that with one foot back, right? But it doesn't hurt. There's no sharpness. The biomechanics of a strike is we want it to snap, we want it to pop. And we can do that with a quick 1-2 motion, pivoting on the ball of the back foot. Okay? Is that a little bit sharper? Yes. Now imagine that on your face, right? Now I'm not going to do that because that's an asshole thing to do. Okay? But you can technically do this just pivoting on the ball of the foot without having to do it with a bow stance where your feet are flat. So why would you do this where your feet are having your heels on the ground and you're just not mobile, you're not explosive enough, right? In fact, if you want to train for striking, especially in combat sports, having a good stance where you're bouncing on the balls with your feet, you're on your toes all the time, this is good to train. This is what we do in Sanda or Santo sparring. However, there is still a reason we do it in bow stance where, our feet are flat, our heels on the ground for stability and strength. And the reason is this, okay? So if you can turn away from the camera. From here, this can be done not only for strikes, but also for throws. So from here, if I were to pivot abruptly, I can use my shunfa, my body method, to off-balance him. Okay? And there can form the basis of a throw. Another way to throw or trip would be to get him off balance, and then I step behind, and then again I pivot off the ball of the foot. What this is going to do, as I strike with my heel into the ground, my knee is going to straighten, and my hamstring is going to hit his hamstring, or at least the back of his knee, whichever one is available, and whichever one gives me more leverage. Okay? All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.